So, if you're listening today, please don't shy away. Please text WhatsApp 07745 278 978 or call into the radio station directly on 01733 602 133. So, have we got an amazing, interesting, world-changing man for us today? I am so blessed and so honored and humbled, actually, to bring a very, very close friend, brother, David Key, to the airwaves here in Peterborough. He is a best-selling Amazon author of his amazing book called Joyride, which you'll cover in a little moment, much more detail as well. He has an amazing focus around the hero's journey. He changes people's worlds globally, if I shared with this. This gentleman has touched 55,000 lives already, and in over 40 countries he has delivered his trainings. His hypnosis is the master trainer of trainers of hypnosis and also of neurolinguistics programming, NLP, as most of us would know. Today he's traveled all the way, from close to London to be with us today, to come to little old Peterborough. He's in the studio with us as well, and I'm going to introduce my very, very close friend, David Key.
Hey, how are you doing, Sukhi?
Welcome, David. This is for me, it's just an absolute humble pleasure, because not only have we had such a beautiful journey together as friends,
That's
brothers,
right.
but I think we've all seen such change in the way you've delivered your own articulate journey within everybody else as well. You've been through all the ups and downs that most of us here on the actual radio station tend to understand and recognize and connect. But before we go into what you're up to today, is it okay for our audience just to connect a little bit with yourself? I love the rapport. So if it's okay, just tell me a little bit about David Key. He's a world order when it comes to neurolinguistics, which is now fast changing because you've moved yourself to a completely different hemisphere.
That's
so
right.
please, the stage is yours, David.
Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you for inviting me over. And, I was considering dialing in by phone, and yesterday I had this feeling that maybe we should be in the same room together. And it's been 6 years since I first met you.
Wow.
And a lot's happened in that time, but excuse me while I clear my phone. So my journey started obviously 52 years ago.
I was giving his age away, audience.
Right, yeah. So I was brought up I was born in Sussex and then moved to Watford through my childhood. I went to 9 schools and I was asked to leave 5 of them politely.
Wow.
I wasn't a very good student, I have to say.
Went to 9 schools?
That's right.
And then you were asked specifically to leave 5 of them?
Yeah, they asked me politely, though. I was a bit of I was off the rails emotionally, and I was a very angry young man. But, so I moved out of my home and I was living on my own from the age of 16 years old. And I guess I had to sort of brush myself down and take responsibility.
But David, do you say that a lot of individuals, a lot of next generation or young generation people who may be listening tonight, they may be facing similar sort of challenges themselves right now in their life. But
that's right.
You are sitting here in front of us showing us how success can be harnessed with humility and love, and to move yourself further forward in life.
Sure.
And to just touching a little bit on that, I mean, when you had those moments when you were being asked to leave school, because I'm really, really humbled that you're being so open and honest with us all to actually share that this is your journey. But how did you manage to get yourself back up, because there may be somebody listening today who's having a bit of an empowerment issue, a bit of clarity. Please, back to you.
Well, I didn't see it as unusual, to be honest with you. I do now when I look at my children thinking, oh my word, I don't think I'd want to put them out into the world at 16, but there's a lot of people, as you say, probably listening that might be going through a tough time at the moment. Well, my experience tells me that those tough times can be turned around into something that can be extremely powerful, empowering, that when we get through those tough times, and we do, most of the time, if we have a deeper understanding as to the nature of where our human experience comes from, which I didn't find out until later on in life, it seems for me that those challenges, from addiction to drugs, angry, fighting all the time, troubled young man, to now going out and helping people who are troubled, working with senior executives who are on the point of burnout and stressed out of their minds, to working with struggling mums and dads trying to hold a family together, problems with relationships, to working with the homeless. And I don't think I'd be in a good position if I hadn't gone through the dark times and come out the other side. You know, one of the philosophies that I have is that you can't give away something you haven't got.
Wow. So beautifully said.
So, you know, if you had £10 in your pocket, you couldn't give me 20.
No.
And if I sort of rewind a little bit, I was married as a really young man. I was married in my early 20s. I worked in the IT industry, and I was very fortunate to have a good mentor in business in the early stage, and then I met you later on in life. I used to work for the former MD of Apple Computers, and he took me sort of under his wing, and with no academic qualification said, get out on the road and go and sell.
Wow.
So I was very fortunate that I was put into big organizations, meeting with very senior people in large UK PLC companies as a young 21-year-old, having to converse at their level.
Yes,
and
very quickly
I learned that I had to be humble, and I was very fortunate. I was extremely successful, but I was married very young, as I said. I was married to a divorce lawyer, and it didn't work out.
Wow.
And it was at that point, so I was sort of late 20s, early 30s, and then I got into trouble with drinking too much. I sort of got involved with drugs. I was effectively self-medicating from a living nightmare in my mind, and I didn't realize that my experience I was creating myself. I thought my circumstances were creating my problems of how I felt. So I went to a stage hypnotist with a friend one evening and had a few drinks, and my friend Russell, it was 1991, I never forget it, we were in Blackpool, and my friend Russell was very shy, extremely shy. He'd never met a girl, he'd never asked anybody for a dance or if they wanted a drink, and I always used to egg him on, go and make friends over there, but he wouldn't do that. And then this stage hypnotist picked him and brought him out on stage. He volunteered.
Wow.
And I saw him do things that I couldn't possibly explain with logic.
So all of a sudden he became like this Jekyll and Hyde in essence, right?
Well, he went from a very shy wallflower to a confident, courageous lion on stage.
You know, this reminds me of a movie some years ago. It was called The Court Jester.
Right.
If you remember Ian Young, our good friend.
Yes, I know Ian, yeah.
And he said there's a court jester, Danny... I don't forget his name, to apologize.
Right.
But he was in the same situation where he had been hypnotized.
Yeah.
And 1 minute he was this reclusive, really uncomfortable individual.
That's right.
And then he became this bravado-led
Yeah.
individual who was going to take on the world. Oh, wow. Yeah. You know, you've heard it in movies and stuff, but I'm here listening to you, telling me the truth.
I saw it before my eyes, and I was gobsmacked. So, because I was still in my early 20s, and I had also picked up a book on a journey to Liverpool in a shop, I think it was W.H. Smith, and it was called Grow Rich While You Sleep. Mm-hmm. And being young, I thought money was where happiness was at. So I bought it, and it was actually nothing about making money and everything about how rich we are as human beings already. And it's our unconscious mind, the part of our mind that we're not conscious of. That unconscious mind is where the richness is. If we think in a certain way over and over and again, we can create self-fulfilling prophecies. So I didn't realize that at an unconscious level I'd been thinking negative things over and over and over. I was really good at it.
And I'm sure other listeners here tonight, you know, do tune in. This is a moment that you really need to take advantage of. David Key's actually with us in the studio. If you're watching us live on Facebook Live or on the Salaam Radio app, then please do call us in on, text in on 07745 278 978. And I'm telling you now, this is a moment not to be missed. Do text and communicate as you always do, and ask a question, because I think Dave is one of those individuals who's racked up well over 10,000 hours, I think, on stage and assisting individuals. So this is a prime moment to get in touch with. Sorry, back to yourself there, David.
Oh, Sukhi, thank you. So anyway, I decided after seeing Russell transform before my eyes, and after reading the book Grow Rich While You Sleep, I realized that there was an untapped power that human beings had, but I didn't know what it was, and I wanted to find out. So I was very fortunate. I'd had a good month working for my employer and had some commissions, so I used it to hire and pay a private Harley Street hypnotist, a hypnotherapist, teach me. I said, I want to learn. And that was 25 years ago. Fascinating. I went on that journey, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up back in a decade ago in America working with Dr. Tad James, who had called me up one day and said he'd like me to become one of a few master trainers and to train trainers of hypnosis. So I ended up working with doctors and psychotherapists and people from all walks of life. And my fascination of hypnosis took me into the realms of neuro-linguistic programming. Because
aka otherwise known as NLP to
that's
other
right.
viewers. Yes, please.
Yeah, so NLP is a meta-discipline for finding out how people do what they do so well. And most people, if you were to ask them, how come you're happy all the time, or how come you're so successful, Sukhi, in business, or how come you're so good at taking penalties or putting the ball, or whatever the particular skill you'd like to master. And the co-creators, there were three of them actually originally, and when they, in the 1970s, started modeling successful people, they started to see that their successful people had thinking strategies. And you could teach people that had no idea about that success, that skill set that they wanted to learn, and you could effectively circumnavigate the long time that it takes sometimes people to get results. So if it took you 5 years to be good at putting the ball in golf, they said with NLP you could short circuit that and reduce the learning time.
Wow, so you could actually speed up. It's a bit like you could literally take your success and bring it forward.
That's right. Yeah. So I started on that journey and studied many other disciplines as well, you know, from energy work to hypnosis, writing 17 book reviews for a Japanese company, going back 300 years on the story of hypnosis, going back to our forefathers, the doctors that used to use hypnosis, like Dr. Anton Mesmer back in the 1760s and 1770s.
That's truly amazing.
Yeah.
Now you wrote 180,000 words.
That's right.
on these book reviews. That's just a feat within itself. I mean, how did you dig deep to get the information?
I was just fascinated with the subject, and I've been a seeker most of my life. So, you know, what with my own personal challenges, like most people, so I'm a human being, my depression, anxiety, I was living in a world of anxiety. I didn't even know it. It was like I was wearing a bodysuit of anxiety, and I was so used to it that I didn't even feel it. And then one day, I was about 5 years ago, Sukhi, I experienced a personal challenge after being in the world of personal development, having trained tens of thousands of people, whether it be face-to-face or online. My life was looking positive, and then something happened in my personal life that was like, you know, the old metaphor of a curveball in baseball.
Yes.
It literally got me out unawares, and I didn't know how to handle it, so I dug deep. Been here before. We all get knocked down, we get back up, and sometimes it's painful. Well, I had one of those emotional experiences in my relationship, and I didn't think that everything that I'd learnt would seem to be helpful, but not as helpful as I wanted it to be. Okay, I didn't understand why I couldn't get rid of this unpleasant feeling that I was having. So it's a bit like someone who's depressed. They want it to go away, or someone who's anxiety. They don't want that. And I had this severe sadness, this feeling of depression and anxiety, and I wanted it to go away. And every technique that I'd been teaching, although they alleviated the experience, they didn't remove it.
That's the key point that I'm hearing here. Basically, an anxiety, a feeling, any kind of insecurity or a fear that you're having feeling of. Obviously, NLP is a toolbox, and it does assist in that context. Then we have hypnosis, which can definitely help as well. But as Davis just clearly said there, he said that it kind of masks over and kind of fixes things on the surface.
Yeah.
So did you then take a different journey there, David, to find another way, another medium, another modality to go into?
Well, I was blessed that this understanding found me. I can't take any credit for coming across what I'm going to be sharing with everybody later, I think in the second part of the show.
Yes.
It was just, when the student's ready to learn, the teacher appears. You heard that old metaphor?
Yes.
Okay, so the teacher appeared, and I wasn't expecting it. And something happened that changed everything. And now I'm teaching this understanding that we'll go into later.
What is the understanding called? And we can touch base.
Well, the understanding isn't very well known in terms of like NLP or hypnosis. If you were to take 1,000 people and ask them, have you heard of hypnotherapy or hypnosis? Probably everybody would say yes. Mm-hmm. Similar with NLP. This understanding has been called many things. Innate health, health realization, the 3 principles. And I would just say that it's a simple understanding that if every human being on the planet were to realize this, it's not something you can put in someone's head. They have to discover it for themselves. It's like balance on a bike. Mm. You can teach balance by saying, hold on to your handlebars and look where you're going and keep pedaling, and there's something called gravity. If you don't keep pedaling, you probably fall off, but you need to balance. Well, how do you teach balance? You don't.
You have to do.
You have to experience it.
A conscious button.
That's
a bit
right.
like this, isn't it? So we end up with like a conscious button that gets pressed, the learning gets taken, and then we're straight back into flow.
So it was something that I realized that had been with me all my life. That's with you. That's with every person who's listening to the radio station, that there were some fundamental principles, not theories or techniques or ideas, but some fundamental principles that human beings have innocently missed as the key to unlocking their true potential and happiness. And I know that might sound like a crazy man going, oh, he's discovered the secret to happiness, but I truly believe we have.
Well, do you know, David, I'm going to actually change it up a little bit, because I think it's just something's happening right this very second in the studio. Let's talk a bit about the 3 principles in your context of happiness, because I'm sure the viewers tonight will definitely want to be aware of how they could make themselves truly happy inside, and not just mask it on the outside with some kind of fixes. But I'm going to go a bit deeper into this and let you sort of roll a little bit, and I'll just let you know when it's closer to our break time.
Sure.
So please, the listeners, do not forget to stay and come back in, because we're going to talk so much more about things, and about the Joyride, the amazing Amazon best-selling book by David Key. .com, and also we're going to cover a few more item things where I think David, we've kind of twisted his arm a little bit, because that's just kind of what we do. That's what Sukhi Wahiwala does, and we've got him, and he's actually ended up readjusting his own web presence and stuff, and he's actually going to give us a 60-minute audio for a very specific reason, which I'm not going to, it'll be in the second half, which is just after the actual advertising, and we'll cover that in much more detail. So back to just covering, I think, the next 5-6 minutes, just talking very deeply about the 3 principles which can work on the inside out.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to do my best, because sometimes I could be speaking about this for 40 hours and people don't catch on. So I'm going to do my best to put it in layman's terms, okay? Every human being, moment to moment, when they're awake, they experience feelings, okay? Sometimes they feel relaxed, tired, exhausted, energized, angry, guilty. You know, the range of emotions that we have.
Yes.
Now, what I didn't realize is, I don't know if there are listeners listening now who can play along with this, but I didn't realize that when you ask a human being, where's your feeling of rage come from? Or your depression, or your feeling of excitement, happiness, joy, enthusiasm, passion, where do those feelings come from? I have not met anybody yet that hasn't come across this understanding. I haven't met one human being, whether it be a psychologist, a chief executive of a multi-billion-dollar company, or my next-door neighbor. When I've asked that question, where do your feelings come from? Invariably, these are the answers I get. My wife, my husband, my children are annoying me. It's my boss. It's my childhood. It's my circumstances. It's the fact I haven't got money. It's the fact that I'm losing my job, and they share external experiences. Now, here's the problem with that. If we truly believe that our sadness is coming from our past, or our fear is coming from the job loss, then we're going to struggle as a human being, as I did, as most of my clients have done in the past. Because you see, when we go looking for something out there that isn't, we'll never find it. Do you know, if all the psychologists of the world who didn't understand this understanding, and by the way, I'm not pointing fingers or being in any way disrespectful, just I'm not a psychologist, so I guess I can say this.
Yeah,
I'm a behaviourist.
You know, we're not here to at all ostracize anything. Absolutely. No. Yes, please carry on.
This, you know, if we all went off on a journey looking for mental health and we went south and mental health was north, doesn't matter how many shortcuts we take going south, we're never going to get there.
We're going the wrong way.
And I think if you were to really look closely at our mental health system, we're actually going backwards. Our learning curve is going in reverse, whereas our understanding of physiology, like if I go to the doctor with a headache now, you know what he's or she's going to say to me? Take a Nurofen, or drink some water, or just relax and go to sleep for an hour and it'll clear up on its own. Whereas 100 years ago, if you went to the doctor and said you had a headache, they would say you need to get the evil out and we need to cut the top of your head off and we're going to give you a lobotomy.
Wow.
Or we're going to do bloodletting to let the evil out. Okay, well, we don't do that now because human beings have sort of had a shift in their understanding about...
Evolved.
Yeah, we've evolved our understanding of physiology, which is great. We're curing all sorts of things now. But psychology is going in the opposite direction. So if what we were doing worked, and this might sound controversial, if no one would be doing harm intentionally, by the way, but if what we were doing worked, then we wouldn't have a crisis on our hands at the moment, in my humble opinion. And it's no one's fault that we have a crisis, because you see, I don't know if we've got time, but to put a bit of context around this, there were people in London that used to carry a posy of flowers and smell them because there was a nasty smell 100 or plus years ago in London, and doctors thought that people were dying from the smell. So a ring of roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. So human beings at that time living in London thought the smell was killing them, and if they carried flowers around, they'd be okay.
Correct.
And they were still dying because they were drinking water out of the Thames with sewage in it. So germs were killing them, but there was a guy that came along and discovered germ theory. He went round and told all the doctors. Do you know how long it took before the doctors believed that there was a thing called germs that you couldn't see that was killing people? 50 years. Millions of people died around the world because of that. So I think innocently the world of psychology is perhaps missing something, some fundamental principles which we'll talk about later, right?
Yeah.
Those three principles, like gravity is a principle. Understanding gravity is really useful if you're standing on top of a tall building. You stay away from the edge, right? Gravity is really useful when you're carrying a pint of milk across the kitchen in the glass. You hold on to the glass because you know gravity is a principle and it works whether you're a good person or not, whether you're in a good mood or a bad mood. It's the water or the milk in the glass will hit the ground because of gravity. Well, there are three principles that are creating the human experience of sadness, happiness, joy. And when a human being understands, they tend to make less mess.
Totally agree. And that's such a powerful message there. Wow. It's actually a principle, much the same as the psychological elements. We're talking about the three elements, which are the three principles, but we're also going to go deeper into this just after the break in a moment as well. I'm not sure if everybody in this room is actually listening as well, is really enjoying what we're going through, because this is getting deep into the change of what we deserve inside, because it's not about fixing what's on the outside, it's about fixing, or should I say, assisting what's inside, evolving what's inside. David, this is just a wonderful talk. Now, if any of the listeners know that we're coming up to our very first break, but please do not disappear. Do come back and listen to the rest of it, because we're going to we have an hour-long recording to give away, and more importantly, David's going to go through the three principles in much more detail, so you can actually help yourself and empower yourself going forward. So, Salaam Radio, we're going to have a little short break just now with a few adverts, and I'd love to see you back, 106.2 FM, or alternatively on Facebook. Please do not forget to text us in on 07745 278 978. So, once again, please text in with any challenges you're having around, we could even say around depression or any thoughts of that sort of nature. And what we'll do is we'll move ourselves further forward and assist as many people as we can on air live today. I hope you're thoroughly enjoying it, David.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone has a question they want to put it in, we'll do our best to answer it.
Yeah, right? And you don't have any problems with people having a live conversation with yourself, do you?
Not at all, no.
Wonderful. So we'll see you back very, very shortly. Do not forget to tune straight back in and text us on WhatsApp, or even connect with us on Facebook if you're watching this live. Thank you very much. So, welcome back everybody to Salaam Radio on the Empower Hour 106.2 FM, or alternatively please tune in to us on the actual Facebook channel, or the Facebook page, which is the Empower Hour page. It's also salamradio.co.uk. Do not forget please to call in. We are with our amazing guest tonight. He's basically an Amazon award-winning coach as well, but an Amazon award-winning actual author of an amazing book called Joyride. But before we get into Joyride, which is probably towards the end of the session, we're going to touch back on the conversation we were talking about was depression and internal self-control, and also having an externalization of fixes instead of actually looking inside for the fix. So David, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask you to continue please with your principal conversation.
Well, something you just said about when we're feeling a certain way and we've lost our bearings, say, we're down on our luck, we can sometimes turn to external things to try and make ourselves feel better. So in my circumstance, it was alcohol and cocaine, and I did a lot of it, and it was temporary, so that's why I kept doing it. What I didn't realize, and I wish I'd have known this back then, but then I wouldn't be sharing this story right now, so in some respect hitting rock bottom is really helpful.
I think
when you bounce back.
Yeah, what we're trying to say is the bounce back, but we're also trying to say that if you are feeling these sort of feelings, it's not the end of the world. Get and seek and come and connect with people to get help. But then we're going one stage further as well, that actually what's happening here today is David's sharing from his experience so that nobody else has to go through this rock bottom feeling. You don't have to go to the rock bottom just to get yourself back up. And this is why we've got David Key on tonight as well. So please, back to yourself. So
what we were saying is, it seems that a lot of the projects, in spite of all these people helpers out in the world wanting to do their best to help end suffering, seems that our success rate is pretty low. I mean, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program, is a 5 to 7% success rate, which is a 93 to 95% failure rate. Now, no one's doing that intentionally, but here's the thing. Back in the day, I was talking about these doctors saying, have a posy of flowers and you won't die, and yet people were still dying. So we live in myths a lot of the time. Like there was the myth of scurvy all the way back in the day, and it took 500 years before human beings in the Middle East, they knew that lime stopped scurvy, but the British Navy took 500 years to catch on. And in that time, 2 million people died. So I came across this understanding, and I was so fortunate because when I was going through, my wife and I, we were going through a real personal challenge. We saw that our suffering was arbitrary. In other words, we had a choice. I didn't know that. I felt hopeless. And all of a sudden I realized that my human experience, my wife's, my children's, and my friends, my family's, my clients, is being created via these principles. And one of the principles, when you ask people, where does your experience come from? And they say, my job, my expense, my past, my childhood, my whatever the reason, it's generally outside. I haven't heard anyone say, well, David, my experience is coming from thought in the moment. And didn't you know that all thought has feelings attached to it? And if you indulge yourself in thinking, because we're the thinker, right? Thinking about those thoughts that come into our mind from the nothingness, just pop in. Every thought has a feeling attached. And did you know that an unhappy feeling is coming from an unhappy thought? It's not rocket science. It's so simple, and yet we seem to have missed it. That understanding that our experiences are coming from thought in the moment. There is no future. There is no past. So talking about your past is a crazy idea. It's not the gateway to healing in the now, because we only have the now.
I truly agree with that.
So how can you help someone by talking about their past when it doesn't exist anymore, apart from a memory carried through time into the now? into this moment. Now, when human beings realize this, they sometimes catch on very quickly and go, well, you're saying all my struggles and my anger I've got inside is coming from inside of me with my thinking. I'm like, yep. It's liberating, because people start to see that they have hope again, that when they understand, for example, this principle of thought, it's so simple that we have to use metaphors to describe it. And one of the things that I use is like, thought is transient. So transient, I didn't actually know what it meant when I first heard that term, so I looked it up. Like clouds that come through in the sky, they come in and then they pass. So clouds, and the weather's always working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never switches off, and neither do people thinking. Even when we're asleep at night, we're having thoughts. They're called dreams. And a lot of the time when we're suffering in the day and struggling and anxious and worried about the future, we're just having a mini daymare, as I call them. It's like we're having day thoughts instead of night thoughts, and we're scaring ourselves. And if human beings could just learn to not be scared of their experience, they would do really well. If they could see that the scary thoughts that are coming into their mind sometimes they're not making them happen. There's nothing wrong with them. Weather happens. Sometimes it rains all the time. It's really not pleasant if you think of it a certain way. But a farmer might be really delighted that it's raining. So it's all a matter of perspective, yeah?
So just to recap there just a little bit, so everybody gets this very, very clearly and in simple terminology, that we're talking about repairing. We're just talking about changing our now, instead of looking into the past and trying to fix it via other methodologies, and possibly even then forward planning it into the future and then thinking about another methodology there. We're actually trying to say, well, why are you feeling this way right now? And actually changing the now. So back to yourself there.
Sure. So the big realization for me was one day I was at home on my own. I was making a cup of tea. This was my first realization that this was true.
Yep.
I was very angry and very cross with my wife. And I'm making a cup of tea and I'm fuming. And then I realized she wasn't there. She'd gone out. So I was cross with my wife, and she wasn't even in the room, so I could not blame her.
Truly amazing.
I was making it up in my head. I was having an argument with a person that wasn't even in the room, and I was feeling more and more rage. And then in that moment, it was like an epiphany. A light went on and went, stop it. You're hurting yourself. You're making yourself annoyed. You're winding yourself up. I'm laughing now because it was like a godsend. It was a mini experience where, from that moment onwards, I knew that the principle, not a theory, not a model or technique, this is a principle. The principle of thought is true. Thought is so underrated. It's so powerful that you could say something embarrassing at a party and it changes your biochemistry because you go hot in the face, you flush, you blush, and all you did was have an embarrassing thought. You say, oh, I should have said that. I wish I hadn't said that. I hope they're not looking at me. And then you feel embarrassed. Your biochemistry changes. Your heart rate goes up. You start perspiring. You start sweating. You go red in the face. And all you did was have a thought. Thought can change how you feel. So if thought can make you blush, change your biochemistry, do you think going over and over sad experiences from our past could change your biochemistry? Absolutely.
This is just so powerful, and I hope everybody's really enjoying this journey with us on Empower Hour 106.2 FM. Please do not forget to connect up and do send some texts into 07745 278 978. Our thought, the first principle, the principle of actually having an argument with somebody in your own mind who's not even in the room. Oh my goodness. And I'm sure you're all thinking, that makes so much sense. Well, it does. Please carry on, David.
So when we realize that our experience is coming from the principle of thought, everybody has 7 billion people on the planet, or 7.5 billion people. Everybody has their own thought system. An analogy, I can only use metaphors to describe this, really. An analogy is like every human being being their own country. Mm-hmm. Imagine we had 7.5 billion countries, and each country had its own weather system. Some countries, like the UK, the weather's up and down. We've had a good year this year. Some countries it's sunny all the time, other countries it's raining all the time. But the weather is transient. It's always working, doesn't need fixing. When it rains, it's supposed to rain. That's how it works. When we're feeling down, it's because we're thinking those types of thoughts. That's all. There's nothing wrong with us. It just feels like there is. And when a human being sees that that's all that's going on, they seem to sort of not get so gripped by their scary stories and their scary movies and their terrible scenarios they're playing out in their mind. When they see there's nothing wrong with them, it's supposed to work that way, they seem to back off.
So kind of let go as well, not having so much hold on you.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the phrases that I hear a lot banded around in this part of this industry, in terms of the principles industry, and this understanding is do nothing. So when you're feeling low, do nothing. People say, well, why? I say, well, because the reason we feel that way is irrelevant. It's just that it's how it works. It's like when the clouds come in, you put up an umbrella and then eventually the clouds go. Let me give you another analogy. This might make more sense to people listening. If I had no shoes and socks on and I was walking around my bedroom and I kicked the bed by mistake, caught the corner with my little toe and stubbed my toe, it would hurt.
Tremendously.
It's supposed to, isn't it?
Yes.
To let me know that I need to be more careful and to leave my throbbing toe alone, and eventually the pain will disappear and then it will heal all on its own. So that's because we understand physiology. Well, what if, and I'm saying, posing this as a question, what if that same was true for your psychology, that when you had a psychological trauma that built into your DNA, that God-given gift that we've called a human body, has got the intelligence already built into it to heal itself if we understand that, and also if we leave it alone.
I'm a true subscriber to this method. Absolutely spot on. Amazingly put together. So if we actually just truly believe in what we're trying to say, what David's going through right now, this is so fundamental to shift yourself forward. I hope everybody's really thoroughly enjoying this.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'll give you an example of how this differs to maybe a different approach. So I'm a coach. I work with senior execs, to the homeless, to professional sports people, to celebrities on the TV. And for me, when I explain to someone, say, you know, you can't be broken. You have inside of you perfect mental health. It's like that diamond. I've used this metaphor a lot, but it's like that. We're born perfect, uncontaminated by the world. When we come out and we look into that baby's eyes, the bundle of joy that's doesn't have language. The baby doesn't have any concepts or belief systems. It just is. Yes. It's spiritual. It's perfect in every way. And then we grow up and we get contaminated. It's like that perfect diamond that came into the world. That was you, the listener. And then sometimes some people's journeys, they encounter some unpleasant experiences, and that diamond gets contaminated. It's almost like a crust of mud goes round it, and it solidifies, and it goes more and more. And then we think there's something wrong with us, but actually all that mud is thought from the past. That metaphor is just that thought and ideas we have about ourselves. We are so much more than we possibly can imagine.
I love it. So moving ourselves forward with this context, I mean, actually allowing ourselves to wash our thoughts, to actually be a bit more present in the moment and change. If you're having a negative thought, just let it ride through and just do nothing. As you said, as we were talking about a moment ago, when David just said specifically, if it rains, you put an umbrella up. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to try and stop it from raining. The rain is transient. It moves itself over, and the next thing is that you have a dry patch. That's right. On to our second, and then.
So the principle of thought, when we understand it, that's all we really need to know, because when we're feeling down, we know the reason why, and we don't look outside of ourselves going, oh, it's because my mum said something that was unpleasant to me and I'm still annoyed at her from 3 weeks ago. We go, oh, I'm just ruminating on an old thought from 3 weeks ago. I need to stop that, otherwise it's going to spoil the joy of the day.
Truly.
So This gives people hope. When you say to someone, you're not broken, that diamond cannot be destroyed, it's perfect, it's just the thoughts from your past, and when you let those go, in other words, when you don't engage them, you don't go, it's almost like the bubble machine that my daughters have when they were growing up. I'd plug it in and the bubbles would come out and they would run around poking them and they would burst them. And they thought it was such good fun. Well, think of thoughts like that. They will pop on their own. They will just come in and they will leave. That's why we can't be in a permanent state all of the time. It's impossible for us to be anxious 24/7 because we're unconscious for some of that. We're asleep.
That's so empowering, just to allow the thought to burst and move on. You can't be the same energy all the single time. So thank you very much, Dave. This is so powerful. And so in the principle of the three principles, what is the second and the third?
Well, they're not in a particular order. They're like a trinity. So we call them we say mind, consciousness, and thought, or universal mind, universal consciousness, and universal thought. So we have personal thinking, personal thought. All my memories from the past are stored in my database, like on your PC. Every Word document you've ever written is in there.
Or in my case, a Mac.
Or a Mac.
PC, yes.
And my case, Mac.
And yours as well.
I dumped the PCs a few years ago. So, but those are personal memories. Then universal thought is thought that we haven't had yet. Where does that come from? It comes from a spiritual space, in my view. Okay? So I might get a thought about an invention. It didn't come from my old thinking because it wasn't in there before. I've never had that thought about an invention. It came out of the blue, and out of the blue thought, out of the divine space, that universal intelligence that we try to do our best as human beings to understand, but we can only understand with metaphors and analogies. So the other two principles are the principles of universal mind, which would be like the spiritual life force energy that we all have. It's energy. It can't be destroyed. Always will be, and it's formless, and then we become the form. So we are made of energy. Human beings are energy.
True.
So without our energy, we don't have a bad day.
Yes.
All right? It's because we don't experience anything without life force energy. We're in the morgue, unfortunately. So we need that principle to have an experience, good or bad. Then we have the principle of thought. Thought has content, and then we do thinking. We think about thoughts. So that's the other principle. Without thought, we wouldn't know it's today. We wouldn't know we're having a good or bad day. So we need life force energy, universal in mind, I call it, or God, some people would call it.
Yes, absolutely.
Then the universal thought. I have thought coming in my mind like clouds and weather systems all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I still wouldn't experience anything if I didn't have the third principle, which is consciousness. And consciousness is just really simply put, when I'm unconscious at night, I'm not depressed, or I'm not anxious, or I'm not feeling happy. I just am asleep. I'm unconscious. And when I'm awake, consciousness is like the senses, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. It brings my internal reality, my thought-created experience alive. It makes my thinking look so real, as if I was in some sort of virtual reality experience, wearing the headset. So there are people, I see them walking around Tesco's or Aldi or Asda, in this trance-like state, experiencing their daydreams, looking at the butter, thinking about what they're going to eat that night, and missing everything that's going on around them because they're just fixated on these thoughts. Human beings do that every day, all of the time. And when they're struggling, if they don't remember, if they've forgotten that it's just thought, it's just a movie in your mind with feelings, and consciousness is bringing it alive. If they forget that, then they struggle. But when they remember, they go, that's all it is. I don't need to worry.
So has humankind, have we actually detached ourselves, and we filled our brain up with other things and other thoughts, that we're constantly empowering some thoughts, but we're also using the consciousness of that. We were talking about when they're out there looking at the butter, but somebody's sitting there, but they're thinking about something completely different. It's like it's as though you're detached from everything at that moment.
Well, I think we become detached. We self-hypnotize. So as a kid, I look at my kids and they play games with invisible friends, and it's really cool because I get involved with that because I love their imagination. I don't turn around to them and say, there's no imaginary lion at the end of the garden, darling. She goes, come on, let's go see Rory. I'm like, okay, let's go see Rory, the imaginary lion. They live in a world of imagination and creativity. They're creative. From nothing, the creation takes place, and they make a den for their imaginary lion, and they have so much fun because they're in the now. They're present. And then something happens as we get older. I don't know what it is. Something switches in our head, and we take life so seriously sometimes. And I just want people to understand that suffering is arbitrary if you understand how you work. If you don't know how you work, then it would be like me going to the doctors with my stubbed toe, saying it's hurting. Why is it hurting? And he goes, oh, I don't know. Let's cut it off and have a look.
Let's cut it open and have a look. See what's going on in that brain of yours, or the toe.
Yeah, let's see what it is. So I'd go from doctor to doctor, and if none of them knew, I would keep stubbing my toe and have no idea why it hurt. So but we know. I'm not joking, seriously. We are running so amazingly connection. The connection here is running really amazing. You can't see it, but hopefully you can hear that what David is saying. I'm truly in synchronicity with this. The whole point of this presence, I've written the Synergist methodology, which is very similar in context, and I call it the RIA, which is the real-time emotional awareness. Right. And it's really kind of beautiful that actually this is the right way of thinking as well. So we're running short on time. Would you believe how fast has this hour gone? And I'm thinking our listeners have just absolutely been open for a gem, and this is the kind of video that gets shared again and again and again. So Salaam Radio is absolutely really happy that we've got David Key with us today. So the 3 principles, David, if you could just give us a quick synopsis of them, and then I'm not letting you getting away, because I'm afraid our listeners come first. Okay. And we promised them something. We promised them some content for nothing. So I'd like you, if you don't mind, just a quick go through again, if you don't mind, just to cover and bring it into a synopsis with the 3 principles understanding, if you can. Okay, really simple put. When we understand the principles that are running our experience of being a human being, life, we tend to do better. We tend not to go looking for the reasons why we're feeling sad. A bit much like I wouldn't need to go to the doctor with the pain in my toe if I knew, that's what happens when you stub your toe. If we know, when I'm feeling sad, it's because I'm just thinking those sad thoughts and I don't have to do it, then we tend to heal up quite quickly. And what's amazing is when you teach people, I worked with an anorexic recently in teaching her that her anxiety about food was coming from her thinking and not the food. When she saw that, after 9 months of therapy and not working, actually it was 2 conversations, she saw that, I was imagining that the food was going to have germs and it was going to hurt me. That's why I wasn't eating it. I don't need to be anxious because I was just making it up in my mind. It's like a nightmare, isn't it? A living nightmare.
This is so powerful, and I hope the listeners are really getting this over here. The point is, in 2 simple conversations, how to move yourself further forward. If you do want to reach out to David, please, David, how can people get hold of you? Okay,
well, there's a couple of ways. Best way really is if you go to David Key, as in doorkey.com.
So that's DAVID Key, as in KEY.com.
And there's a complimentary talk that I gave on these principles a few years ago. You can download it for free. You can unsubscribe. You don't have to get my emails or anything like that if you want to, but it's a gift. It might be useful. Have a little listen, and I go into a little bit more detail. It was a keynote talk I gave a while ago. And if they want to speak to me or reach out to my team, then go to the Contact Us page and just send a message in, and one of my support team will reach out to me and set up something.
This is just so wonderful. Now, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to talk specifically, and everyone's really enjoyed this, and people are going to definitely be contacting us and asking for your details again. Right. So I just want you to talk a little bit about Joyride, because Joyride for me was very, very... It was a very humbling but very proud moment to see it hit #1 in Amazon. So
wow, just really. I mean, again, if you go to the davidkey.com website, there's the tab will say on the menu book, and you can have a look. There's a little video, there's testimonials, and you click the button, and it'll take buy now button. You don't have to buy it, but if you did, it'll take you to Amazon. And you can read some of the reviews there and the synopsis of the book. But it was an idea. It came to me actually on the 14th of October about 6 years ago. I sat down. I wanted to write a book for years, and it was going to be on NLP and selling and business. And I sat down and I just saw this metaphor, and it was about a ride in a Mustang from Miami International Airport all the way down to the Florida Keys. It's a journey I took many years ago in the 1990s. And it was a road trip in a Mustang, and the reader is the passenger and I'm the driver, and then we have a conversation about these principles all the way down to Florida Keys, with the purpose of the person who's completed the book to have had a shift in their understanding, and perhaps in a lot of cases the reviews are people have had transformative experiences.
Look, we're into the last minute.
Right.
David, how can people get hold of a copy again? So they can Google it on Amazon?
Yeah, go to Amazon, David Key, Joyride, and that's a metaphor. So the book is Joyride, 3 Principles, 1 Life, Infinite Potential.
Wow. If everybody has absolutely enjoyed themselves as much as I have enjoyed myself to interview my good friend and brother David Key, then please share this video with as many people as you possibly can, and see if you can help them, once they understand the 3 principles of thought, universal mindset, and the consciousness, and how they sit together as a trinity to give the empowerment to every individual. We're running very short on time, but this has been your host Sukhi Wahiwala with David Key on the Empower Hour on 106.2 FM. Good night, and I hope to see you next week and listen to you, and hope you get through that. Thank you very much, David, for being online.